In the heart of New York City, beneath the towering giants of glass and steel, a moment was unfolding that no one could have predicted. It was a cold afternoon, the kind that bites into your bones, yet the city was alive, thrumming with a constant hum of rushing footsteps and honking taxis. But amidst the chaos, something was about to happen that would stop everyone in their tracks. Barron Trump, the youngest son of former President Donald Trump, was out for a rare walk in the city, far away from the cameras, the media frenzy, and the gilded world he was born into. Barron, often seen as the quiet, reserved member of the Trump family, had grown up in the shadow of public scrutiny. Most people didn't know what he was really like. His demeanor was calm, almost distant, and his public appearances sparse. But today, something was different. As he walked down Fifth Avenue, a homeless man, weathered by the streets, eyes sunken but full of life, approached him. With the kind of audacity that only the desperate possess, the man asked the unthinkable. "Can you spare $1?" His voice was cracked, his face lined with years of hardship, and his gaze unwavering. It wasn't a plea, but a demand. $1. A tiny sum to a man born into billions. For a moment, Barron froze. The busy world around him seemed to slow. People walked past without even noticing, the homeless man's voice lost in the sea of rushing commuters. But Barron heard it. And the weight of that moment pressed down on him like the city's endless skyline. Everyone had always seen Barron Trump as just the son of someone living in the shadow of a famous father. But what happened next would challenge everything people thought they knew about him. What could Barron say? How could he respond to a request so simple, yet so profound? In the eyes of this stranger, this man who had lived a life far removed from Barron's opulent world, would Barron show the same coldness that many expected of the Trump name? Or would he reveal a side of himself no one had ever seen before? The answer, when it came, was not only shocking, it was unforgettable. Stay tuned, because what Barron Trump said next would leave everyone stunned, questioning everything they thought they knew about him and his family's legacy. As Barron Trump continued his solitary walk down Fifth Avenue, his mind wandered, as it often did, away from the blinding lights of fame that had surrounded him his entire life. The world knew him as the son of one of the most controversial and influential figures in American history, Donald Trump. Yet Barron had always kept a low profile, staying largely out of the limelight, as if he were trying to carve his own path away from the shadows of his family. Most people who saw him in public only caught a glimpse, tall, quiet, with an almost eerie calm. But today, his day would take an unexpected turn. The homeless man, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, made his way toward Barron. His tattered clothing hung loosely on his frame, his eyes tired but alert. The man's voice cracked as he spoke, not in a begging tone, but with a kind of weary expectation. "Can you spare $1?" The simplicity of the request, combined with the man's unrelenting gaze, hung in the air like a heavy fog. For a moment, Barron didn't know how to react. This was no ordinary situation. Most people in his position would have simply brushed it off or ignored the man entirely, as they did so often in a city that had learned to turn a blind eye to the homeless. But Barron wasn't like most people. He had grown up in a world where privilege and excess were everyday realities. Yet, somewhere deep inside, he understood what true hardship looked like. He had seen it from afar, in fleeting moments. He knew what it felt like to have everything and yet, sometimes, to have nothing. It was a dichotomy that he had grown accustomed to, yet one he had never quite learned to navigate. He stopped walking and faced the man. The cold wind cut through the street, and people rushed by without a second glance, but for Barron, the world seemed to slow down. Time itself felt like it was holding its breath. "Why ask me?" Barron's voice was quiet, but there was a surprising depth to it, a maturity that belied his years. The homeless man hesitated, as if caught off guard by the question. He looked at Barron, his expression unreadable for a moment before he spoke again. "Because you're different," the man said, almost quietly. "People like you, they walk by, they ignore us. But you're not like them." There was a raw honesty in the man's voice that cut through Barron's own uncertainty. The words stung, and in that moment, Barron felt a pang of guilt. It was as though the man saw right through the facade of wealth and privilege to something deeper, something more human. Barron stood still, his mind racing. He had been taught all his life about the importance of wealth and power, about the family legacy, about maintaining the Trump name. But this was different. Here was a man who had nothing, asking for something so small in the grand scheme of things. Yet, to him, it was everything. Barron wasn't sure what had made him stop. Maybe it was the man's words, or maybe it was the piercing gaze that seemed to see past the layers of privilege he wore. The people on the street continued their busy lives, unaware of the quiet exchange happening before them. But for Barron, this moment would become a defining one. "I don't have cash on me," Barron said, his words slow but deliberate. The homeless man looked at him, disappointment flashing across his face. But Barron wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded bill. It wasn't much, a single $1, the very same amount the man had asked for. But it wasn't the amount that mattered, it was the gesture. "Take this," Barron said softly, extending the $1 toward him. The man stared at the bill for a moment, as if unsure of what to make of the offering. Then, to Barron's surprise, he shook his head. "No, that's not enough," the man said. "I don't want your pity, kid. I want your respect." Barron blinked. Those words hit him harder than anything. He had expected the man to take the $1, to thank him, to walk away. But what the man had said struck a chord deep inside him. Respect. Not charity. Not sympathy. Just respect. The weight of that challenge settled in Barron's chest. This wasn't just about $1, it was about something much deeper, something that transcended wealth or social status. It was about recognizing the humanity in others, no matter their circumstances. Barron stood there for a long moment, the wind whipping around them, but he didn't move. The people who had passed him by earlier now stopped, and for the first time, they seemed to notice the strange encounter unfolding in front of them. And in that moment, Barron made a choice. He wasn't going to simply walk away, to brush this aside. He was going to meet the man where he was. With a calm but firm voice, Barron spoke. "Respect isn't something you can give or take. It's something you earn. And right now, you're showing me more respect than anyone else on this street. So, no. You're not getting just $1 from me. You're getting my attention, my respect, and my promise that I'll never forget you." The words hung in the air, powerful and unexpected. The homeless man's eyes softened, his hardened expression breaking into something almost resembling a smile. The city around them seemed to pause, and in that fleeting moment, it felt as though Barron Trump had finally stepped out from behind the shadow of his family's name. It wasn't just about giving $1. It was about giving dignity, and in return, Barron had found something in himself that he never knew was there. As the man took the $1 from Barron's hand, he nodded, his gratitude unspoken but clear in his eyes. Barron turned and began walking away, his heart lightened by the brief but powerful exchange. And though the city's noise soon swallowed the moment, the memory of that encounter would stay with Barron forever. The world had seen him as just another privileged heir to a billionaire empire. But in the eyes of the homeless man, Barron Trump had become something more, someone who understood the value of respect, of seeing others as human, regardless of their circumstances. In a world obsessed with wealth, fame, and power, Barron had found something far more precious, his own humanity. As Barron continued walking away from the homeless man, the streets of New York began to shift around him. The city, known for its fast pace, its impersonal nature, seemed to slow down in the wake of the conversation. The air, crisp and cold, carried an unusual weight, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for the next moment to unfold. But Barron didn't know that what he had just said would echo far beyond that single interaction. He didn't know that, in that moment, something far greater than just $1 had been exchanged. He didn't realize that his words, his quiet, humble words, had struck a chord not just with the man in front of him, but with everyone who had witnessed the exchange. And even more shockingly, they had sparked a shift within him, something deep and transformative. As he moved through the crowd, a sense of unease crept over him. The reactions of those who had witnessed the exchange varied. Some had kept walking, dismissing the moment as just another fleeting interaction. But others had stopped, and the weight of their silence spoke volumes. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. People were talking about what had just happened, some in disbelief, others in admiration. They were talking about Barron Trump, the quiet, reserved son of the former president. He wasn't what they had expected. And for the first time, he was the one who had captured their attention. Yet, Barron couldn't shake the feeling that he had done something more than just give $1 or offer some words of respect. He had opened a door to something he hadn't expected to confront, his own identity. He had always lived under the shadow of his father's towering legacy, in the golden-crusted world of politics, power, and privilege. But the conversation with the homeless man had cracked open something within him that Barron hadn't known was there, a vulnerability, a rawness that had been hidden beneath his composed exterior. The moment Barron turned the corner onto a quieter side street, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Startled, he spun around, only to find a woman, probably in her early 30s, looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and awe. She was holding her phone in her hand, the screen lighting up her face. "Are you Barron Trump?" she asked, her voice filled with cautious wonder. Barron nodded. "Yes. I saw what happened back there," she continued, her eyes still wide. You didn't just give him $1. You gave him something much more important. You gave him respect. And you gave all of us a lesson in humanity. That moment, it's going to change how people see you." Barron was taken aback. He had never thought of it that way. He had never considered the impact his small gesture might have on others. He was just acting on impulse, driven by a desire to connect, to do something that felt right in the moment. But now, as he stood there on the corner of a quiet street, he realized that what he had done had rippled far beyond what he could have imagined. He wasn't just Barron Trump anymore. He was becoming something else, someone who had the ability to change perceptions, to challenge preconceived notions. "I didn't mean for it to be a big deal," Barron replied, his voice still carrying that calm, collected demeanor, though there was a slight tremor of uncertainty beneath it. The woman smiled, shaking her head. "It's a big deal. More than you know. People are tired of the rich and famous ignoring the people who need help the most. And when they saw you, someone with everything, showing that level of humility, it made them stop and think." Barron stood silently, his mind processing her words. As she walked away, the reality of the situation began to settle over him. He had been raised in a world of wealth and influence, a world that had taught him to focus on what could be gained, what could be protected. But today, for the first time, Barron had focused on something far more valuable than money, something deeper, something that could never be bought or sold. The next morning, news outlets began to report on the unexpected encounter. The headlines were filled with a mixture of shock and admiration. "Barron Trump shocks NYC with act of kindness," one headline read. Another claimed, "Trump's son shows unlikely respect for homeless man, leaves public stunned." As the story gained traction, Barron's name began to circulate in the media once again, but this time, it wasn't because of his father's presidency or the family's wealth. This time, it was because of his own quiet, introspective moment, a moment where he chose to show empathy, to break the walls of privilege that often separated him from the rest of the world. The world had expected Barron to be just another heir to the Trump name. They had expected him to be cold, aloof, and detached from the struggles of everyday people. But instead, he had shown a side of himself that few had ever seen, a man capable of seeing others not as less than, not as inferior, but as equals. And in the days that followed, more people came forward, sharing their own stories of kindness and respect they had received, stories of moments that had touched them deeply, much like the one Barron had unknowingly created that cold afternoon. His single act of humility had sparked a chain reaction, and it was clear that this would be the moment Barron Trump would be remembered for, more than any headline or power struggle. But Barron didn't care about the media attention. He didn't need to be recognized. The true impact of that moment, the quiet exchange, the respect given and received, was something far more lasting. It had changed something inside him, and in the hearts of those who had witnessed it, it had shown them that even in a world defined by privilege, there was still room for kindness, respect, and humanity. In the days and weeks that followed, Barron Trump would go on to live his life, as he always had, quiet, reserved, and thoughtful. But the world had seen him, truly seen him, for the first time. And they would never forget the lesson he had imparted in that fleeting, unforgettable moment. He had shown that kindness, though simple, could transcend barriers, change perceptions, and leave an indelible mark on the world. As the days passed, the story of Barron Trump's unexpected encounter with a homeless man continued to resonate in the hearts of those who had witnessed it, and even more so with those who had heard the tale in passing. The headlines eventually faded, as they always did, and the world moved on to the next drama, the next scandal, the next headline-grabbing moment. But the ripple effect of Barron's act of humility lived on, silently changing lives in ways that no one could have predicted. What had begun as a quiet encounter on a New York City street corner had become a beacon of hope in a world that so often seemed lost in cynicism and division. Barron's simple yet profound act of giving respect, a respect that went beyond charity, beyond power, beyond wealth, had shown people that sometimes the most valuable thing one could offer was not money, but humanity. It was a reminder that no matter how high the tower of privilege one might sit on, no matter how grand the name one carries, there is always someone who deserves to be seen, heard, and respected. And in that respect, Barron Trump had demonstrated that true strength lies not in power, but in compassion. True greatness does not come from what you have, but from what you give. And when Barron turned his back on the world of privilege he had been born into and instead saw the person in front of him for who they truly were, he became a beacon of inspiration for others to follow. This story, more than just about Barron Trump, had become a reflection of all of us. How often do we walk past others, too absorbed in our own lives to notice those who are struggling, those who are suffering in silence? How often do we forget that it takes only a moment to make someone feel seen, to acknowledge their humanity, to offer them respect instead of pity? Barron's moment of compassion had shown that a small act of kindness could reverberate through a community, creating a shift in how we view one another, how we treat one another. And that was the real lesson, the lesson that Barron had taught us all. We are not defined by what we have or how others see us. We are defined by how we choose to treat those who have nothing, how we treat those whom society has forgotten. In a world that often places value on the superficial, Barron's encounter had reminded us that the true measure of a person is not in their wealth or status, but in their ability to see others as equals, as people deserving of dignity and respect. As Barron continued with his life, no longer just the son of a former president, but a young man who had shown the world a different side of himself, he was unknowingly becoming part of a much larger movement, one that asked the question, how can we be better? How can we be kinder? How can we show more respect, not just in the grand moments, but in the small, quiet ones? In the end, Barron's story wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about a moment of kindness caught on camera. It was about the change that could take place in all of us when we start seeing each other for who we truly are, not the labels, not the appearances, not the money, but the human beings who share this world with us. Barron had given that homeless man not just $1, but the recognition of his dignity as a person. And in return, he had unknowingly found his own. So, as you walk through your own life, remember that you have the power to make a difference with a single act of kindness. You have the ability to offer someone the respect they may never have received. You have the power to change the world, not with grand gestures, but with small, everyday actions that demonstrate humanity at its core. Barron Trump's unexpected encounter is a reminder that no one is above showing compassion. No one is too far removed from the human experience to offer kindness, to see the value in others. It's a lesson that transcends wealth, fame, and status. The true measure of greatness lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we give back. Let Barron's story be a call to action, a reminder that in a world so often divided by differences, the simplest acts of kindness can bridge those gaps and bring us all closer together. Don't wait for the headlines or the spotlight to shine on your moments of humanity. Instead, let your actions, no matter how small, speak louder than any word or deed ever could. Because, in the end, it's not about how much we have, it's about how much we give.